Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Now, as you may know, I am doing a series of random reviews, restocking my overflow room, working backwards from the letter Z. Now, this means that there are lots of discs that I either don't listen to that often, or I had to put them somewhere else because I was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. You know, you got to make choices, right? And so the overflow room represents some of what I have. The rest of it is basically up here. You see it around here, and it's in various rooms on the upper floor in various alphabets. There's at least as much again as I have in the overflow room elsewhere. I just want to make that point. So if something isn't in the overflow room, that doesn't mean I haven't heard it, or it doesn't exist, or I don't have any of it. I very well may. Who knows? Anyway, that's not the point. The point was there was this snarky comment. I mean, it was funny. It was cute. You know, when you're in the classical music biz, you know that you're going to have to deal with sometimes a relatively high smart-ass quotient. And this was one of those. And I wasn't offended by it or anything, but it just was sort of pointless. So I think I got rid of it. Anyway, it was, why don't you mention music by... And then followed the list of the usual 20th century deplorables, as Hillary Clinton would have called them. You know, Carter and Boulez and Stockhausen, and, you know, the list went on. Birtwistle, I don't know, Harry Parch, who I like, actually. Yeah, and a lot of them who I have talked about. I mean, I do talk about Carter. I do talk about, I mean, and positively, you know. There's a whole bunch of them who I've done, but this person was obviously unaware of. Anyway, that's not the point either. I keep talking about what isn't the point. What is the point? The point was somebody wrote back and said, don't expect this from Hurwitz. His taste is too conservative. Well, that got my dander up because these are obviously people who have no clue what I've said. And I know that sounds defensive, but it got me to thinking. What I'm thinking about is, what is conservative? Because what did that list of deplorables have in common? And there were like 20 names, who knows? What they all have in common is that they're basically not tonal. And the fact that they're not tonal is, to me, one of the most uninteresting things that you can hang your hat on musically, because there's very good not tonal music and very bad not tonal music. What matters is whether or not the composer, you know, understands what to do with the fact that they're not untonal. They're not tonal, pardon me, not untonal. Not tonal. Some understand, some don't. And what really makes it crazy is the idea that associating oneself with these, you know, composers, the ones who, you know, give the audience the finger, basically, means that you're not conservative. You're somehow avant-garde. You're somehow advanced. There's some sort of, you know, moral superiority that comes with that, which is just makes me crazy, because nothing could be less true. But what is it to be conservative? I think those composers are extremely conservative. Why do I think they're conservative? Because their styles are defined almost entirely negatively by what they are not. They're not tonal, they're not rhythmic, they're not this, they don't do that. You know, music is a big, broad category. And composers have at their disposal a toolbox, a huge assortment of things that they can use to construct their music. And the composers who I admire the most are the ones who, first of all, are able to effectively use the most things from their toolbox, or who, if they're more limited, understand the consequences of their limitations, and that shows in what they wrote. Let me give you the obvious and best example. The best example is Webern. Webern is a composer who almost everybody admires, even people who don't like atonal music. Why? Because of the absolute integrity and understanding of what he was doing with the tools that he used. One of the consequences of using the tools that he used, the 12-tone method, the lack of, you know, sort of, you know, expanded lyrical melodies, is that his music is quite brief. He knew if he was going to write in this style, then it naturally had to be short. there's also the extraordinary stylistic purity. That's what Poulenc said about Webern, and that what Poulenc admired. And Poulenc loved Webern because of that, because you could see that here was a guy who had a language that he knew how to use with complete ease and confidence and mastery, and it's marvelous. Now, you may not like it. It's not easy, but you can't question the integrity of what he was doing and the fact that he understood what he was doing, and he made the most of the tools he chose to use. Well, a lot of these other people, I think, have no idea what they're doing with the tools they choose to use. They choose to use them for reasons which actually have nothing to do with music particularly. They're because they need to have a personally identifiable style and philosophical originality in order to check off the box of their being card-carrying members of the avant-garde. I mean, it's a political, a social, a cultural phenomenon. What it has to do with music sometimes, I wonder. I really wonder. And that doesn't make them, not conservative, because they were lemmings. Their era is over. They were all following this same path, this path where you had to, you couldn't do X, you couldn't do Y, you couldn't do Z, you couldn't do this. And they all got together in Darmstadt. By the way, I have covered all of those Neos boxes of Darmstadt composers, you may have noticed, or you may not. It was an interesting and important historical moment. Did a lot of great music come out of it? Some. In any percentage better than music of supposedly more conservative composers? No. Besides, why is it that people who are tonal are conservative? I don't see that. There are so many ways you can be tonal and interesting. I mean, Vaughan Williams is tonal, and he's tonal in a way that nobody was tonal before him to the same degree. I mean, he's modal tonal, very listenable. But there are also, for example, in the Third Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony, examples of blisteringly crushing dissonance that go down rather well. They do because of the way he writes. He uses triplanar harmony. Yeah, use that term there. Tovey talks about it, where you've got whole masses of harmony that may clash terribly, but because they're on different planes of sound, different timbral levels, you perceive them differently, and they all work together. It's a beautiful use of that language. And it doesn't preclude, radical dissonance. It doesn't preclude elements of what might be considered avant-garde, like triplanar harmony, for example. Or what about someone like Martineau, who I love? Martineau's harmony is almost entirely non-functional. In other words, it's tonal, it's conservative because it's listenable, but it's put together in ways that are very unpredictable and that don't move according to the usual conservative rules of modulation, of changing key and whatnot. There are strange juxtapositions and odd chords happening here and there. It can be extremely unsettling. And I just love it. I love it because it's extremely unsettling, but because the chords make their impression. It's a use of harmony that's very non-conservative or untraditional. And, but nobody would consider Martineau to be avant-garde. He should be. He should be, because, what matters is not how garde you are, whether you're avant or whatever. What matters is whether, like I said, whether you understand how to use your own musical language and do so effectively. Now, I talk about a lot of, supposedly avant-garde composers. I talk about George Crumb. I did a whole talk on Morton Feldman, who I love. I mean, we talk about Frederick Rzewski. We talk about the other many composers, some of whom are more avant than others. Lou Harrison, an extremely avant-garde composer. Why? Well, because he did cantatas in Esperanto, and he wrote music that was heavily influenced by non-Western cultures and used non-Western musical modes. I mean, Messiaen did too. This whole idea of being conservative or not conservative strikes me as absolutely stupid and totally untrue to the musical facts. Conservative is, and it's not necessarily bad to be conservative if you're good at it. Brahms was conservative, right? But he was really, really good at it. He was the ultimate musical conservative in some ways. And Schoenberg, of course, insisted that he was actually progressive, that he was avant-garde. because he had to for his own personal purposes. So all of this business about whether or not you're dealing with certain kinds of music that have certain pretensions. I mean, the reason to talk about Boulez is because you might love something by Boulez. I mean, I love something by Boulez. Everyone talks about how I trash Boulez. I do. He's fun. He's a target. He's fun to go after. I've always enjoyed Rituel in Memoriam Bruno Maderna. I think that's a marvelous piece. I saw it live. And, one of the reasons I like it so much is because I have to confess, a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine who I love, was playing it, and she's gay. And she played the percussion parts, there's a gong cage thing. And she said to me when she was doing it, she wanted to try to get an audience. There's not a big audience to go see these things. She said, come see the lesbian in the gong cage. And after that, it got me through Ritual. It really did. And I've never been able to hear it quite the same way since. I always think of the lesbian in the gong cage, but whatever works to get through it. But I think it's a very imaginative and daring piece, but is it avant-garde? Why? What is it that makes it somehow, progressive, where somebody who uses a major chord is not progressive? And more than that, why is that a plus, a morally superior quality? It's not. All that matters is whether it's good music or bad music. You could be very conservative tonally, which is the only thing these people were talking about who were taking me to task, was whether your harmony is conservative or not. But you could be completely radical and avant-garde in a million other ways. Look at the minimalists. I mean, the minimalists are incredibly conservative harmonically, but they are also incredibly avant-garde in many other ways, in their use of form, structure, repetition, rhythm, all of these things. So again, it all comes down to what tools you choose from this huge musical toolbox, and how you employ them to create a musical language. Maybe my taste is conservative. I don't, I think I spent most of my career as a critic talking about music that most people have never heard of. I don't regard that as conservative. I don't care when it was written. If nobody's ever heard of it and I'm promoting it, that's not terribly conservative, because remember, that's outside the traditional canon of recognized classics. And there's nothing I love more than talking about music that's outside that canon, right? From Jolie Bragas Santos to you name it. There's 2,600 videos. Probably a good third of them are things that are not in the classical canon. So I don't regard that as conservative at all. And I don't think we should think that way. I think it's absolutely musically ignorant to define progressive as how listenable something is, number one, or simply through one musical element like harmony, when there's so much else that goes into making up a piece of music. So these are just my random thoughts that flitted down as I was reading this comment. I mean, come on, folks. We're here to experience the widest range of what music can be. So that means some music is difficult. I mean, I have my whole series, right, of tough symphonists. It's a series. It's an ongoing series. Music that's difficult and dissonant, and I love it, and it's wonderful as often as not. You just have to know what it is and recognize what it is. But what I want to get to, what I hope all of this huge pile of work that we're creating together. I mean, I do the videos, but you do the comments, and the comments I regard as integral to the video. At least the better comments. It's all about the possibilities. Haydn said, Haydn, who was as avant-garde as anybody could ever be, said, how much there is yet to be done in this amazing field of music, even by someone such as I had been. There's so much more to do. That's the attitude. That's healthy. That's great. But let's not define and pigeonhole people by negativity, by music that is lacking in this quality must be better than music that has that quality. It's silly. It's just silliness. It's thoughtless. And I know there's plenty of that out there, but I wanted to make the point. So I've made the point, and I'm looking forward to hear what you think about it, of course. So keep on listening, friends. That's what we're going to do, whether we're conservative or not conservative, or traditional or not traditional, or part of the canon or outside of the canon, or in the box or outside of the box, or whether we're lesbians in a cage hitting gongs. It's all marvelous if the composers know what they're doing. And we're going to try and figure that out. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.